We're gonna do a class on clouds today. I've got some pictures here that we're gonna work from. And I think there was one more. All right. And what I want to do is start sketching, all right? I've set out my paper. I can get people paper if you need it. I've got some here at the house. You can come pick it up. I can leave it in a little envelope at the door. I've taped it down with our nice 3M painter's tape. I've made 4 sections here because what we want to do is we're going to do 4 exercises on clouds, and I'm gonna sort of show you how I sketch things. We're gonna paint sort of all 4 of them at the same time. That way we can, let one dry and work on another one. And I think we're just gonna give it a try, all right? And what I want to do, this is specifically for the beginner class, because we haven't had a chance to do any kind of landscapes or anything yet. So normally when we would meet, this would be our next lesson, is working on blues and clouds, just to start with like one element that you would have in a landscape picture, okay? So I will also email these photos to everybody, so that you have this for reference. And this is a suggestion, the photo, right? So what I want you to do is sort of use this as a guide. You don't have to do the whole thing, but it's very important, I think, when you're learning watercolor, to work from pictures, because that's the only way you're really going to know whether you're getting anywhere, right? If you're able to paint something that looks like the image you were working from, then that's terrific, and you will see that you improve more by studying things, right? By looking, you're teaching your eye how to see color, how to see the differences in shading, looking at shapes, and that's something that you have to learn. You have to learn observation, and that's a very important thing when you're learning to paint. All right. I think we're going to do these as one at a time here, because I usually forget where I am. So there are many ways to paint in watercolor, right? We can wet the surface, or we can paint with it dry. And because this picture has a lot of hard edges to it, I am going to paint it in a dry style. So what I want to do first is get some of the negative sky space in, so that I know where my clouds are going to be. So I'm going to pick a brush here, and I'm going to get my blue palette out, and we are going to start painting. So I've got some cerulean paint here, and what I'm going to do is sort of start in one section, and I've got a very wet bead of paint, right, and a little bit of something at the end there. So I'm going to take this. I kind of leave my pinky on the paper, and I hold my brush up very straight, so that I can use just the tip of the brush while I'm painting here. I'm not going to put in every little thing, but what I'm trying to do is sort of show the the outside edge of this cloud. So this, you can see how wet this line of paint is. It's sitting up on the surface. It's very wet, and what I can do is I can grab a little more paint, and I can sort of start to kind of fill this in a little bit. Another thing I can do is add another blue while I'm working, right? The nice thing is, because this is wet, right, I put on a lot of paint, so it's not gonna dry on me too fast. But I'm also adding a little bit of ultramarine here. That's ultramarine. Is that ultramarine? No, that was cobalt. This is ultramarine. There we go. So we've got cerulean and ultramarine kind of mixing together here. And I'm maybe gonna leave a few little white spots, right? Because they're always nice. And we're just sort of gonna let that paint move around a little bit. I'm kind of tilting it up a little. We're gonna let the water move the paint around, and we're gonna let the two colors sort of just blend on their own, meld together, all right? So let's do the same thing over on this side over here, right? So I'm gonna, again, same thing, hold your nice pointed round brush that you guys have up straight so that the paint kind of just falls off the tip of the brush. And let's see if we can get some kind of weird, this is a little more softer on the other side. So I'm going to grab a paper towel, and we'll use that in a minute. I'm going to add a little bit more cerulean here. And just kind of come around. It's like filling in a coloring book a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more water to it. This side of the cloud is a little softer, so let's see if we can do that by maybe blotting this with a paper towel. And I'm going to come back in and sort of dance some little sky around. Boy, they're so fun. I like nice fluffy clouds. So we've got some cumulonimbus, I think, if we remember from 6th grade science, right? I'm pretty sure. Let's add a little bit more. This is, I've got the ultramarine out again. I'm gonna just drop that in. You know, what we try to do is, you know, you're working from a photo, and you, honestly, you can work from any photo, right? So if you've got some great sky pictures, you can just work from those, right? You don't have to use mine. I like to paint with a lot of color, so it's very rare that I'll paint a picture and have, you know, of the sky and just use one blue. I'm not really, that's not my thing, right? So what I like to do is add a few different blues. You know, that's my suggestion to you, is sort of mix things up a little bit. This is another one here called Verditor, and if you don't have it, that's okay, just use what you have. All right, so we're gonna kind of, what we want to do is you know, now we can sort of see where the clouds are going to be. I can add a little bit more up here, right? I want you to paint, you know, out to over the edge of the tape, right? Our picture goes all the way out. And what we want to do also is, you know, we want to look at the overall composition of this. You know, I'm sending you pictures that I feel like have a nice composition anyway, but that's something you want to consider when you're painting. I'm gonna also, I've got my brush, I've thinned out the paint, and I'm gonna come in, and I'm still working with a dry paper, but what I'm gonna do is, now we're gonna come in and just add a little bit of shadowing or dimension to the clouds up here. So I'm taking my paintbrush, I'm putting a little paint down, I'm adding some water, and I'm just sort of trying to create a little bit of depth here with the three, we'll end up adding more colors too, but here's some more cerulean, you know, and what we can do is we can darken some of this up later. I want to leave the white areas, right? The very dark, we've got a lot of dark clouds with white areas showing up. So what we want is to have the lights be the white of the paper, and you know, that's what creates the dimension and the fact that you've got highlights and shadows, right? I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's gray to this, right? Because we've got the clouds, you know, we've got the really super, super blue sky, but then the clouds are kind of shaded. So I'm, because I've got so much paint on here, I can just sort of pull it around. Something that's also very kind of fun to do is, while your sky is still wet, just kind of hit it in a few places so that the blue of the sky can come into the clouds a little bit. It's always a nice fun thing. Okay, so we're just going to take a little bit of shadow here. Let's see, what else can we do? We've got some nice dark shadows on the bottom. Don't worry about any trees or anything like that yet. We're going to put they will go in later. This is actually just Payne's gray, which I don't even know if we've talked about yet, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful color, very kind of a bluish gray, so it's, you know, it works really well for clouds. It adds a little bit of dimension, it adds a little bit of color, but it's still, you know, it's, I don't know, for me, it's one of my favorite colors, Payne's gray. And you can still add a little blue also. Let's see, we add a little cerulean there too. Never hurts. You know, the nice thing about watercolor, or what is wonderful to try and achieve, is to let the colors sort of mix on their own. Don't fuss with it, don't push them, don't blend them so much that you end up with the same color all over everything, right? You want a variety of colors. That's the whole point, I think. Right, so what I'm going to try and do, we're going to leave some little white spaces, because that's going to show us the outsides of the clouds where the sun is shining on it. And we're just kind of following this around, trying to leave as much white as I can. Now this whole side of the picture is kind of gray, so let's kind of just take a little water, a little paint, and sort of smooth that around. You can always blot things with a little bit of a paper towel. That works. You can kind of soften up an edge. I'm going to come in here and add a little bit more. And we're just playing, all right? This is not you know, we're not trying to create a masterpiece. We are doing exercises, all right? We're experimenting. And so don't feel like, you know, what you're painting is a disaster. It's okay. You have to try. You have to make mistakes in order to learn things. That's how it works. It's part of the process, all right? So no worries. Just breathe. And enjoy this time of creating clouds, because it's actually the one nice thing that's going on right now, right? One nice thing in the universe is to take some time out to paint. So I hope you all are doing well and not too stressed and not too distraught about everything that's happening. And let's see. So this is looking nice. I've got the Payne's gray here. The cerulean is popping out. The ultramarine is very nice. It has a kind of a very granular look to it when it dries. Let's get a little more Payne's in here. sometimes if things are too wet, you know, I take a little bit of water out of the end of my brush. So now I have a tiny bit more control when I put my paint down, right? If my brush is very wet, I'm going to end up with a bloom, right? If I have a lot of paint on my brush and a lot of water, what will happen is the water will start to push everything that is already on the paper out of the way, you know, and if you're doing it on purpose, that's fine. But often it happens when your brush is overly wet and you're adding something to a surface that's starting to dry, right? You just want to be aware of how much water is on your brush when you're painting. And if I take a little out, then I have a tiny bit more control over where things go, how much it blooms. I've got a little, oh, well, it's a pencil line. Okay. If you get a little bit of paintbrush hair on your paper here, if one of the bristles comes out, just leave it. Don't try to take it off. When the paper dries, you can just brush it off. You'll end up spending a lot of time trying to get it off, and it won't. It'll mess up your picture. All right, so just leave that if anything like that happens. Okay, let's see. I've got a little more cerulean here. You know, and I'm working on the areas that are drying. So what I can do, I'm sort of skipping around and picking different areas. I've lost a little bit of my white over here, so let's try the paper towel and see if we can get some of that back. All right, we'll pull this down a little bit here. All right, we're not going to put the trees on until later. Maybe we won't. We'll see. Pretty. So we got a difference here between the sky and the clouds, right? The clouds are a little more gray. Let's put in a little more blue, just for the heck of it. Right, that was a little wet. See how I kind of created quite a few little blooms right there. The nice thing about painting clouds is they're made out of water. It's all moisture and condensation and evaporation, and it turns out that we are going to give this guy a try. So let me sketch this one out. Same thing, you know, the paper is not as long as the picture is, but that's okay. We're just going to use as much of it as we can. I kind of scribble, all right? We just sort of put things on the paper. Don't erase your pencil lines, just leave it. It's just a guide, so just leave them. It's just sort of keep things so you know where you are. So this one, let's see if we can do this. Let's think about how to do this. Okay, so I've got this guy, it's got a tiny bit of yellow in it, right? The clouds, looks like the sun is like almost setting, just about to start setting. And, you know, the tricky thing about adding yellow to, you know, sunsets and blue skies is that things can turn green, right? If you're not careful. So what we want to do is we're going to just put some of this light, I've got a very, I've taken my gamboge and I have watered it down a lot, and I am just going to put a tiny little bit of yellow in some of these clouds, you know, and actually I'm looking and seeing that it's got there's a little bit of pink too. So let's grab a little opera and thin it out really, you know, a lot of water in your opera. You're trying to make a very pale pink, right? So it's a very concentrated color. So you want to use just a tiny little bit on your brush. I have no idea why I'm holding my brush like this, but I am. I'm sort of using the side of the brush a little bit more this time around. All right, now we're going to take a little, this is some beige, mixing it in with the opera makes a very beautiful kind of orange, peachy sunset color. Okay, let's maybe leave that a little bit, right? So what we're doing is we're putting in the yellow shading in some of the front, and back clouds here, and we're gonna let that dry, or what we're gonna do is paint around it. Well, what should we do? Let's paint around it, all right? That way I don't have to stop the video and we can keep going. So I'm gonna grab my cerulean again. I'm using the paper dry, right? I haven't wet the paper yet. So what I'm gonna do is kind of come here. I am gonna come up and maybe we will hit this one just for the heck of it, right? Okay. So exactly what I told you is we're doing the opposite now. We're gonna let the blue and the green kind of meld a little bit up there, because that's part of the sky is a little grayer. Okay, so we are coming around. I'm using again the tip of the brush, and I'm making these nice kind of fluffy cotton ball cloud shapes. We're gonna bring that all the way around. I think I'm gonna send my cloud video lessons here to my cousin, Glenn Johnson, who is the Rochester weatherman, because he is a cloud authority, and I want to get his opinion on how we're doing here. I think that would be pretty funny. He's a very good guy. Okay, I have to try and talk louder. All right, so we've got a couple different blues here. Again, it's, add a little bit of water. It doesn't have to be even. It's okay. It's more interesting if it's not. See, we've got some nice color mixing over there with the yellow and the blue. So what we're going to do is just kind of come in, maybe throw in a little, trying to reach some blue right there. We're going to thin this out, lighten it a little bit, because you can see this part of the sky is much lighter. So let's thin that out even more. And we're just going to come around and leave some of the white areas, right? So we've got the highlights. And, it's okay to paint over this, right? This cloud is going to be a lot darker, so we can actually bring this up a little further here, right? Anything that's darker, it's okay to paint over. You don't want to have to worry about having a line on your sky. Okay, now this area we don't want green, so we're going to take a little bit of paper towel and get rid of that. All right, pull this back down here. Okay, let's see, what else can we add to this? It's drying nicely, but I think I want to add, we haven't tried any Prussian yet, so let's put a little bit of Prussian blue in here. Let's see what that does. Ooh, that's Prussian green. Prussian. Okay. I added a lot. Okay. A little more panes. There are, many ways to hold your brush. The thought is we're trying to create something that doesn't have a brush stroke. So one of the things that's something that I can try to do is sort of roll your brush a little bit, right? And that way you're not as it's not as specific. It's a little more irregular, right? If I kind of twist this around and things like that, I can get an interesting texture here. Let's see, we want a little more, well, let's go with our cerulean here. All right, I'm gonna pop in some cerulean into this. It's already got the panes on it, so it's a little darker. You know, I think I even see a little bit of purple there, so let's grab a tiny bit. We've got the dioxazine purple, right? It's very concentrated also, so you want to just have a tiny bit of it. Dilute it with water. I should put it on here. All right. So what I'm trying to do is sort of delicately lay colors on top of each other. Did I lose my cloud? I lost my cloud. There's my cloud. Okay. All right. And the more I leave it, the more I just layer the colors or drop them on, the more I will have a variety of colors that stay on the paper, that dry nicely, and don't blend too much. Okay, this is still too wet. I shouldn't be doing this, but I am anyway. I'm trying to create this line of color down here. You know, if you look at these pictures of the clouds, it's what we're seeing is the atmosphere, various clouds. Some are in front of others, some are further away, and so in order to create that depth, we've got to have some things in front of others. And we can do that by adding some things a little bit later. All right, so play with the paper towel. All right, see what that does. You can use a dry paper towel or a wet paper towel. Wet paper towel will take off a little less paint, and sometimes that is useful. Okay, I'm going to come in here and try and get this. There's a little bit blue in this area here. We do want it to meld with the Prussian that we've got going right here. Okay. And you know, if your cloud gets a little bit bigger than the cloud on the picture, that's just fine. Don't worry about it. Right? The sky changes all the time. Not a problem. You know, what we're going for in this instance is something that's wet on the paper, and we're trying to not have any real brush strokes that show up per se. All right. Okay. Let's see down here. Let's add a little more. Another bank of clouds over here. Right. And choosing a different blue just to have it show up a little better. And I am using my brush kind of on the side. I'm sort of dragging the point across. I'm trying to get my point across. Ah. Okay. Let's grab a little, that's my metal palette you're hearing. Let's take a little, get a little Prussian here. Everything's sort of mixed together on my brush. So these guys down here are a little fluffier, a little more concentrated. Oh, there's a paintbrush here. Leave it. We'll blow it off later. Okay, let's grab a little, tiny bit more of that dioxazine, just because. Drop that in. Let's see. You know, we're just playing. We're just observing. We want to try and add more color than we see. We want to make it look interesting. I want, and we want to have fun, all right? We're gonna Bob Ross this one, all right? We're just gonna put the tiny fluffy clouds in, right? That's what it is. Fluffy clouds. All right, it's a little wet. I should be leaving it. I'm gonna leave it. I'm just gonna get rid of that line right there. Pull up this a little bit. Okay. Yep, let's just leave that one for now. All right, so we've got two going here. Let me see if I can get to this one while the other one is drying. Okay, this will be interesting. Okay, this one has all dried now, so let's see if there's anything else we want to add to it. Right, I can add another layer. I can leave this, it looks fine. But if I come in and give the clouds a little bit more dimension, I think they might show up a little bit more. All right, so I'm going to come in here and get rid of some of this white here because I want to try and show that we're showing the underside of the cloud. Right, so we're trying to get a little bit more darks in here. And what we're trying to go for is something that looks like we haven't, we want it to look effortless. We want it to look like they just happened on their own. Right? No effort. So you see I'm using a fairly thin wash of Payne's Gray on top of this to try and just pull out some of the highlights here. Right? The darker I make the background, the more the whites show up. That is that's the plan. That's the general idea. We'll see if it works. Right. Drop a little more blue in, because it feels like it's quite a bit bluer there. A little blue here. Right. Get this big guy here to show up. So what this is the other term this is called is we're painting the negative. We're painting around the highlights to get them to pop out. Right? So you paint sort of behind your white areas. And the white is the white of the paper because you can't get any whiter than that. That's why we don't put white in the palettes, because we don't want, watercolor is supposed to be very translucent and transparent, and white paint is by nature opaque. So when you add white to a watercolor, you dull that area. The white paint that you use is also, for some reason, never as white as the white of the paper, which is why we try to leave the white of the paper. And there are things that you can use. You can, masking fluid, all of that kind of stuff. We don't want to use the masking fluid with the clouds because you're going to get too hard an edge. The masking fluid is gives you a very sharp edge, and often you need to come back and fix it afterwards. So the key is you want, we want to teach you how to leave some white, leave the white areas. And of course, did I leave the white areas? No, I didn't. So here's another thought, right? If it's gotten a little too dark and you've lost a little bit of your white highlights, as I did right over in this area, I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab a paper towel. got a little brush here, a little flat brush, and I'm just gonna kind of delicately scrub this a little bit. Try and get some of this off so that I have a little more, you know, highlights in the clouds here. Okay. Right here. All right, we'll go back to that again. We'll do that a little bit later. Well, no, we're gonna do it over here. Sorry. Okay. We can let it dry. We can also do that again. We can keep going with something like that. But you know, we can leave this too. The clouds are my gosh, they're just condensation, right? They're fluffy and light, and you know, you don't want to you don't want to make them look so heavy that they're gonna fall out of the sky and crash down to earth. So it's nice to keep things light, okay, and fluid, and not fussy, right? We're just interested in all the different colors here, and we're trying to create an atmosphere. So let's see, we've got those two going, and how about let's take a break, okay?